Okay, so let's take a look here, and first of all, just at what's been going on in general in the world around us in terms of a timeline. Between 1910 and 1920, sort of, we had a lot of calamities here in the world. We had, in particular, we had World War I, which actually spans sort of 1914 to 1918, kind of in here. So we have World War I. No question, this was disruptive both for lives and families and cultures, but also for the economy of the nations involved in the war. From 1914 to 1918, what are the numbers I found? 16 million died, 26 million people injured. If you think about human capital and labor and those kinds of scarce resources, imagine, you're young, presumably originally healthy, active males who were part of your economy going off to war and getting killed or injured, and then all of the manufacturing capacity that either got diverted over to war production or destroyed if you were in Europe as part of bombing and fighting and stuff around it, is a huge hit on the world's economy. Now, along with that, and sort of in the same rough time period as World War I, was the Spanish flu epidemic, which is what we're kind of interested in given H1N1 right now. Various ways they called it. I'm going to use the Spanish flu thing. It was indeed a pandemic. Actually, H1N1 today is called a pandemic as well. But what was important for us back then is that just at the same time as we were losing young, healthy men to war, either diverting them or losing them through death or injury, we also were starting to lose other younger people. It turned out the Spanish flu, a little bit like the flu we're going through right now, the Spanish flu disproportionately hit younger adults. And so on top of the war injuries, we had the flu. And in fact, the war helped spread it. It was a variety of theories about where the flu actually started and how it migrated from one place to another. But here in the United States, it was pretty clear that the flu really got transferred and communicated through troops in training, military troops in training. Young men would come from small towns who maybe had been infected with the flu, go to a troop training base in the middle of Kansas or North Carolina or something like that. All of a sudden you have a lot of men of the same sort of risk factors, all in close proximity to each other, and then the flu sort of spread quickly through them. They all pile onto troop ships and go over to Europe. And in fact, there were a noticeable number of deaths to flu on the troop ships just over there. And so all these men arrived there carrying the bug and spread it to the local population. So the war actually had a lot to do with sort of quickly spreading it around. Now these days, jet airplane travel takes care of that, thank you very much. But back then, what otherwise might have been a more localized thing was much more global because of the war. So those are pretty tough times. The 1910 teens, basically, were pretty tough times on a lot of scales. Once the war was over, it took a while, actually, for economies and governments to kind of settle down. It's actually very hard to transition from a wartime economy back to a peacetime economy. Everybody's looking forward to it, switching back from war materials to consumer materials and things of that sort. But nonetheless, it's still a really hard, it's a hard thing to do. And so it took, in the early part of the 20s, it took us a while to kind of get settled down. I don't remember the exact date. I believe we had another recession. We had a recession in the early 20s, partly because of this sort of dislocation of war economy versus a peacetime economy. But by the mid-20s, 24, 25 or something like that, at least here in America, things really started popping. You've heard the term the Roaring '20s. The flapper girls and the Charleston and all of that stuff. It got to be a very exciting time, lots of enthusiasm. The men were back, families were started, industrial output increased, people had jobs. It just was a really exciting time here in the United States and in some other Western economies. Not all of them, however. In fact, one important exception was in Germany. Since Germany lost World War I, when the Allies and the vanquished all got together to finally negotiate the final peace treaty, the Treaty of Versailles, it ended up being a very what's the right word? It was a harsh penalty, and a harsh penalty imposed through the treaty. And part of it was that they wanted to punish Germany, and so there were very significant war reparation requirements, i.e. money that had to be paid by Germany and Italy and to some extent Austria to the winning powers as partial reimbursement for the costs of the war. But also there was a lot of concern about trying to keep Germany from rising again and being another threat to world peace. And so there were lots of restrictions placed on the German economy. So between those restrictions and and then the very, very harsh war reparation things, Germany was held down. So it was not a fun time in Germany. And in fact, from a political science point of view, and we're going to actually see this again when we talk about John Maynard Keynes, but one of the things that those harsh conditions in the Treaty of Versailles did is actually make it easier for Germany's National Socialist Party, i.e. the Nazis, and Hitler to rise to power. It's very similar in a way to when the Soviet Union pulled out of Afghanistan and left this big vacuum, and everybody was in terrible shape. There was food, the whole economic infrastructure had been destroyed, and that opened up an opportunity for the Taliban to come in and present what seemed to be an attractive alternative. Yeah, you had to agree in Afghanistan, you had to agree to abide by their very fundamental religious sort of rules, cultures and all of that, but they promised to provide some order and strength and take care of people, and they were actually fairly good at that. As long as you abided by their very strict religious rules, they actually sort of made life possible for people. Same thing happened in Germany. The National Socialists, through Hitler and so on, were able to provide and turn around the economy, provide some sort of sustenance and support for the people during those hard economic times, as long as people sort of followed their heavily nationalist platform. So Germany was an exception, but here in the United States and in England and places, boy, the economy was just rip-roaring.